it's important to feel heard and validated. This is something that we often struggle to do. It's a great challenge with the people in our lives, and how many conflicts could be resolved if we actually heard the other person. And even if we disagreed, if we still validated their point of view and then tried to introduce our own. But that's what we do with our friends. What about with our enemies? And unfortunately today, there are too many people we feel are our enemies, and we don't give them any benefit of the doubt. They're completely wrong. They have no foot to stand on. They have no insecurities that we can validate in any way, shape, or form. But what if we did? What if we stopped for a moment and said, even though we disagree with them, even though they may be wrong, could we recognize where they're coming from? And a place that we rarely ever do that is in the Torah. Our enemies are evil. End of story. And while they may indeed be horrible people trying to destroy us, if we took a moment to understand where they were coming from, we could learn a lot about ourselves. So in this week's double parasha, which is Chukat-Balak, Chukat, my bar mitzvah parasha, talks about the para aduma, the brownish reddish heifer, but Balak has one of the most amazing stories in the Torah. It seems like a midrash, but it's real. Balak, the king of the nation of Moab, one of our greatest enemies, asks this prophet Bilam, he's a non-Jewish prophet that the rabbis say his power may be equal or very similar to that of Moshe, and they talk about what does that mean, but ultimately Bilam is a great power. Now Balak has a few options. He could go to Bilam, pay him a lot of money and say, give me more power, make my troops immortal, invincible, mighty and strong, but instead he says, attack the Israelites, curse them. So why does he choose to attack instead of ask for blessings and betterment for himself? And what this comes down to is to understand where Balak is coming from. Think about what's going on. Moab, the nation of Moab, doesn't just decide, hey, there's this nation of Israel, let's destroy them for no reason. They're seeing the nation of Israel attack all these other peoples on the cusp of entering into the land of Canaan that will be Israel, and they're being victorious. They're conquering all these nations and they're winning. So the nation of Moab, under their king Balak, feels threatened. They feel deeply insecure. And out of that insecurity, rather than thinking about bettering themselves, they take a defensive and attacking stance, and they ask for curses. Fortunately, at the last moment, Hashem turns Bilam's curse into a blessing, the famous one, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. How goodly are your tents, O Yaakov. But let's take a step back to this moment when Balak actually asked Bilam to curse. So it's in the book of Bamidbar. And the language, Ve'ata lechana ara li et ha'am hazeh. And now, go please and curse for me this nation, the nation of Israel. And again, it actually, the end of the verse Balak recognizes that Bilam could curse and bless, but why is he only asking him to curse? Now, the commentator Ovadia Sforno, in his Italian commentary, he writes, Asher tevarech muvarach. Which says, you can, the one who can do blessings. So he has the power of blessings. But he says, Hine kocho lo haya levarech, aval haya lekalel. The power of Bilam, he didn't have a power to bless. His strength was only to curse. And how did he curse? Behiskir avon or bekivun sha'ah. And he would mention a curse about the sins, the insecurities, or the weaknesses of the other nation at some key essential moment, really when God is listening, when God is deciding the fate and what's going to happen to the nation. He looks down, and Bilam knows how to talk so that God will listen, and he says, the Israelites sinned with the golden calf, or naming, or the sin of the meraglim of the scouts. And that's where his power is. But again, it's a defensive, attacking stance, and it's all about pointing out the other person's insecurities. And this can speak to all of us, because whenever we get in a fight and somebody attacks us and pushes our buttons, the first thing that we want to do is attack them and turn on them. And that's how we defend ourselves, by creating this bubble around us. We really want them to do is to treat us with kindness and respect, but we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to deal with other people's insecurities, and part of that has to do with our own insecurities. When somebody attacks us and says, you've been using too much money, you don't know how to spend money, our response might be, I know exactly what I'm doing. But if we thought about it, first of all, we could say, you might have a point. I think I'm doing the right thing, but why don't we take a look at the way the money is spent and then say, you know what? I have been spending a little too much money. That's not the way any fight in any relationship, marriage, friendship, parent-child, it never goes that way. But imagine if it would. Because the moment that we stop and say, wait a minute, are they making a valid point? Maybe even though I feel attacked right now, they're saying something that I need to listen to because it's something that I actually feel insecure about. The reason I'm lashing out so much is they kind of made a good point. And if I could listen to it and realize that the reason that they're attacking in the first place is because I have something that I need to deal with, and they recognized it and it frustrates them. And if I validated them and said, you know what, you're right, I'm not so great with money. I don't like the way you said it, but I hear you, help me be better. Conflict would go very differently. And this goes not only for the conflict in relationships, and I said money because I think that's one of the most common things that causes conflict in relationships, but even in the way that we talk to other people about religion. And the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Bezalel, 15th century Prague, wrote this beautiful piece in a work called the Be'er HaGolah. And he was talking about what happens when a student comes to a rabbi and asks them a charged question about the Torah, about religion. Could God really have done this? Could miracles happen? Is it true that the rabbis in the Midrash did X, Y, and Z? And one way to react is to lash out and say, how dare you, our tradition is clear, you're an apikoros, you're a heretic. Or we could say, wow, I recognize that that's a valid question and I'm not sure. And I recognize that we're not even sure, I don't know how to prove it. And he writes it beautifully. I'll read here the English translation. A person should not reject something which is against his or her own view, especially if it is not presented as an attack on religion, but is simply an honest expression of the other person's beliefs. Unfortunately, a lot of these attacks are couched in the language of attack, but still, if it comes from a legitimate place of insecurity, we need to be able to hear it. Goes on. Even if it is against his own religious beliefs and faith, he should not say, be quiet and shut your mouth. That's what we do when someone attacks us. We just attack them right back and shut them down because we're insecure and we're not sure how to really answer the challenge that they gave to us, because there will not be a clarification of that person's religious understanding. In fact, in such cases, we should tell a person to speak his mind freely and fully express how he feels, such that he should not feel that he has not been able to fully speak his mind. If sincere questions are silenced, this is indicative that the religion is weak. Now here he's talking about religion. But this speaks to all of us. When someone attacks us because they were frustrated by something we did, and our only response is to scream at them, it means our insecurities are really there and we don't know how to deal with them. We can't face our own weaknesses and challenges. If everyone in the world could recognize where they need to grow, where they would hope for blessings instead of curses, conflict would be very different in this world. And he goes on, the attitude is the opposite of what some people think. They mistakenly think that forbidding people from discussing religion strengthens religious faith. If I knock somebody down, if I cut them deeply, I have a great retort, I think I'm in the right. But really, I'm just ignoring the problem underneath. I'm ignoring the insecurities and the weaknesses that both of us have, that the other person, it's coming out in a harsh way, but it comes from a sincere place, and I'm not giving space to hear that. Suppression of dissent and prohibiting people from speaking is a weakening of religion and a weakening of ourselves. Now, we're not going to be able to change this overnight, and there are some beautiful articles and experts out there who talk about how we can stop in the moment of being attacked and think about, wait a minute, why are they attacking me? Before they pushed my button, how did their buttons get pushed? And if I can recognize that and validate it, then I can stop the conflict right in its tracks. And that's not how our emotions work. But if we could develop that as a skill, wait, why are they mad at me about the money? Oh, because they have some real insecurities and concerns. And if I can hear those and make them heard, I'll turn their anger into a real conflict, or really a challenge, not a conflict, a challenge that we can actually go through together. And we see this in all spheres of life where people are attacked with some legitimate claims, but instead of hearing them, instead of saying, I don't like being attacked, but I hear where you're coming from, they just lash out, and what happens, it creates this feedback loop of destructive behavior until it destroys a relationship. That's true for our friends, our family, our leaders, our relationship even with God, and certainly with our religion. It's going to take years for people to develop this skill, but the next time somebody picks on you, think about why. Why were they so frustrated? What button was pushed to set them off? And if I can recognize that, I can stop the fight before it happened, and instead of cursing them, I can bring blessings for both of us. Shabbat Shalom.